What if I told you that for nearly 1,000 years, the beating heart of human progress lay not in Rome, not in London, not in Paris, but in the great cities of the Islamic world? That while Europe stumbled through the Dark Ages, another civilization carried the torch of knowledge, faith, and power, lighting the path for generations to come. From the deserts of Arabia to the palaces of Andalusia, from the bustling markets of Damascus to the golden domes of Samarkand, the Islamic civilization rose, flourished, and shaped the very foundations of the modern world. But how did faith inspire an empire that stretched across 3 continents? And why does its story remain one of the most misunderstood chapters in human history? At its height, the Islamic world preserved more than 500,000 manuscripts in Baghdad's House of Wisdom. Algebra, chemistry, and optics, words and sciences we still use today, were given form in these halls. When Europe lost Aristotle, Galen, and Ptolemy, Muslim scholars saved them. When the West forgot the stars, Islamic astronomers charted them with precision. Without this civilization, the Renaissance might never have been born. Did you know? Nearly 1 in 3 of the celestial names we use in astronomy today, Aldebaran, Betelgeuse, Vega, are of Arabic origin. Hospitals in Cairo treated thousands daily. Cities like Cordoba had streetlight centuries before London or Paris. This was not just an empire of faith, it was an empire of ideas. But it wasn't only knowledge, it was faith, a civilization bound by the words of the Quran. Seek knowledge, even unto China. This call inspired generations to travel, to learn, to build, to dream. From traders who crossed the Sahara with books and gold, to sailors who navigated the Indian Ocean by the stars, this world was united not only by swords, but by belief. And yet, even the greatest civilizations faced shadows. The Mongols, the Crusaders, internal strife. Each wave of conflict tested the strength of this world. The fall of Baghdad in 1258 marked a dark chapter, but ideas, unlike empires, cannot be destroyed. The Islamic civilization was not just a chapter in history, it was a bridge that carried the wisdom of the ancients into the modern world, a bridge built on faith, knowledge, and resilience. For 1,000 years, this world shone like a beacon, reminding us that human greatness is born not of division, but of curiosity, unity, and vision. And perhaps the greatest lesson it leaves us is this, that when we seek knowledge, when we value wisdom, and when we rise above our differences, we, too, can build a civilization that will be remembered for 1,000 years. At the heart of the Islamic civilization lay a force more powerful than armies and more enduring than empires. Knowledge. It was knowledge that transformed small desert towns into great cities. It was knowledge that turned scattered tribes into a civilization stretching across continents. And it was knowledge that gave the Islamic world its most lasting legacy, an intellectual tradition that continues to shape the modern age. Imagine walking through the streets of Baghdad during the 9th century. The air is alive with the sounds of merchants, poets, and scholars debating in public squares. But beyond the bustling markets, a new kind of treasure is being collected: books. Thousands of manuscripts, carried from Greece, Persia, India, and Egypt, are translated into Arabic. This was not only preservation, it was transformation. The words of Aristotle, the mathematics of India, and the medical texts of Galen were not just copied, they were expanded upon, tested, and improved. This era came to be known as the Golden Age of Islamic knowledge, and its center was the famed House of Wisdom. Inside this great library, scholars worked tirelessly, translating texts into Arabic, and in doing so, they created the largest repository of knowledge the world had ever seen. But they did not stop there. They challenged the old masters, they questioned theories, and they added discoveries of their own. Al-Khwarizmi, a mathematician working in Baghdad, gave birth to algebra. Even the word algorithm comes from his name, and without algorithms, our computers and phones would not exist today. While Europe struggled in the shadows of the Dark Ages, the Islamic world was charting the stars with astonishing accuracy. Astronomers like al-Biruni and al-Tusi mapped the heavens with such precision that their work guided explorers centuries later. The names of countless stars we see in the night sky, Aldebaran, Vega, Betelgeuse, still carry Arabic names, a reminder of the civilization that gave them to us. Medicine, too, was revolutionized. Hospitals in Cairo and Damascus treated patients from every background, rich or poor, free or slave. Doctors like Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, wrote the Canon of Medicine, a book so influential it was taught in European universities for over 600 years. They performed surgeries, developed treatments, and introduced methods of quarantine to prevent the spread of disease, concepts that still guide medicine today. And it was not only the great capitals like Baghdad or Cordoba that flourished. Across North Africa, the Middle East, and Central Asia, schools, libraries, and observatories were built. Knowledge was not locked away for the elite. It was shared. In Cordoba, Spain, the streets were lit at night, and the libraries housed hundreds of thousands of books. At a time when much of Europe could barely read or write, the Islamic world was producing encyclopedias, maps, and scientific instruments of remarkable detail. But perhaps the most striking aspect of this era was how knowledge was seen. It was not a luxury. It was a duty. The word of the Prophet Muhammad, "Seek knowledge, even unto China," inspired generations. This command turned education into a universal value, urging Muslims to explore, to learn, and to pass on wisdom wherever they traveled. Traders carried not just spices and silk, but also mathematics and medicine across the Sahara and into Asia. Ideas moved faster than armies, and the result was a network of learning that stretched across continents. This pursuit of knowledge was not just about science or numbers. It was about understanding the world and humanity's place in it. Philosophers like Al-Farabi and Averroes debated the nature of existence and the role of reason. Poets and storytellers enriched languages, blending the spiritual with the intellectual. Calligraphers turned the written word into art, making learning itself a thing of beauty. And yet, what made this knowledge truly powerful was its lasting influence. When the Crusaders returned to Europe, they carried back more than treasures. They carried back books, ideas, and new methods of thought. When European scholars translated Arabic texts into Latin, they found themselves rediscovering Aristotle, Plato, and Galen, not from the originals, but through the Arabic commentaries that explained them in ways the ancients never had. These works ignited the Renaissance, the scientific revolution, and ultimately the modern world. The story of the Islamic world is not only about empires and battles. It is about how ideas can shape humanity. Knowledge gave the civilization its strength, and it gave the world a legacy beyond borders, languages, and faiths. Today, every time we solve an equation, use a hospital, or look up at the night sky, we are touching the echoes of that thousand-year tradition, and that is the real power of knowledge. It outlives rulers, it outlasts dynasties, and it continues to guide us forward, just as it did 1,000 years ago. Faith was the heartbeat of the Islamic civilization. It was more than a set of rituals or beliefs. It was a glue that bound people together, stretching across lands and cultures as vast as Spain in the west to the steppes of Central Asia in the east. This was not simply about the rise of religion. It was about how faith became the foundation of a civilization that, for nearly 1,000 years, united millions of people through a shared vision. From the moment Islam emerged in the Arabian Peninsula in the 7th century, its message carried a call for unity. Tribes once locked in endless conflict were bound by a new identity that transcended bloodlines and clans. They were reminded that they were no longer just members of a tribe, but part of a wider community, the Ummah. This sense of belonging gave strength to a people who would soon carry their message far beyond the deserts of Arabia. As Islam spread, so too did its culture of unity. Cities like Damascus, Cairo, Baghdad, and Cordoba became crossroads where Arabs, Persians, Berbers, Turks, Africans, and countless others shared the same prayers and walked the same streets. What could have remained a patchwork of cultures instead grew into a powerful tapestry, woven together by the common thread of faith. No matter their language, background, or status, believers prayed facing the same direction, recited the same words, and looked to the same holy city of Mecca. This single spiritual compass gave cohesion to an empire larger than Rome had ever been. Yet, faith was not only spiritual. It influenced law, governance, and even daily life. The principles of justice found in the Quran shaped systems of rule across regions. Leaders were expected to uphold fairness and accountability, guided by a belief that power was a trust from God, not a personal possession. The Islamic legal tradition, or Sharia, provided a framework that reached into commerce, education, and family life, creating stability in lands where countless cultures overlapped. It was this consistency that allowed trade to flourish and travelers to cross from Morocco to India with shared customs and protections. The annual pilgrimage to Mecca, the Hajj, became a powerful symbol of this unity. Every year, thousands from across the Islamic world left behind their differences and stood side by side in the same white garments, performing the same rituals. The journey itself was transformative, not only spiritually but culturally. Pilgrims carried stories, goods, and ideas back to their homelands, spreading knowledge along the very same routes that carried silk, spices, and gold. In this way, faith was more than personal devotion. It was a bridge across continents. Art and architecture reflected this unity as well. Mosques from Spain to India share familiar designs, arches, domes, minarets, and intricate calligraphy, each echoing a common spiritual language. The beauty of Islamic calligraphy, often drawn from verses of Quran, turned the written word into art that adorned mosques, palaces, and everyday objects. It was a reminder that knowledge and devotion were deeply intertwined, and that beauty itself was an expression of faith. Education carried the same spirit. The Quran's emphasis on seeking knowledge inspired rulers to build schools, libraries, and universities. From Al-Azhar in Cairo to madrasas of Central Asia, learning was not reserved for one people or class. Instead, it became a shared pursuit, bringing together minds of every background. Faith gave this pursuit its purpose. Learning was not just for advancement, but for service to God and humanity. But faith also guided social values. Charity, or zakat, was not optional but a duty, ensuring that wealth circulated and communities supported their most vulnerable members. Hospitality became a virtue, and travelers could find shelter in lands far from home, bound by the shared ethics of Islam. Even in times of conflict, these values reminded rulers and warriors alike that faith was more than conquest. It was about responsibility, compassion, and unity. Of course, the Islamic world was not free from divisions. Political rivalries, dynastic struggles, and sectarian differences often threatened its cohesion. Yet time and again, faith pulled people back together, providing a foundation stronger than politics. While empires rose and fell, the spiritual core of the civilization endured, linking people to belief long after rulers lost their thrones. What made this unity remarkable was its inclusiveness. Jews, Christian, and others who lived under Islamic rule were granted protection as people of the book. While tension certainly existed, there were also centuries of coexistence where faith created a framework for different religions to live side by side. In cities like Cordoba, synagogues, churches, and mosques stood not far from one another, symbols of a world where shared values allowed cultures to blend and thrive. In the end, faith gave the Islamic civilization a sense of identity that was greater than borders, greater than dynasties, and greater than the struggles that threatened to divide it. It was faith that united far-flung lands into a single world. And it was faith that left behind not only monuments and manuscripts, but also a reminder that when people are guided by shared values, they can build a civilization that stands the test of time. Empires rise and fall, palaces crumble, dynasties vanish, and even the mightiest armies are eventually silenced by time. But the legacy of the Islamic civilization was never just in its political power. Its true greatness lay in the ideas, values, and discoveries that outlived the rulers who once claimed glory. Long after the banners of caliphs and sultans disappeared from the battlefield, the impact of the civilization continued to shape the course of human history. When the Mongols stormed Baghdad in the 13th century and set fire to its libraries, many thought it was the end of a golden era. The great house of wisdom was gone, the city reduced to ruins. But what the conquerors could not destroy were the ideas that had already spread far beyond the city walls. Manuscripts had been copied and carried to Cairo, Damascus, Cordoba, and beyond. The knowledge nurtured in the Islamic world was already planted in the soil of Europe, Asia, and Africa, ready to grow in unexpected ways. One of the most enduring legacies was science. Muslim scholars had not only preserved ancient Greek works, but expanded them, laying the foundations for modern fields of study. Their texts were translated into Latin and studied in European universities for centuries. Without Ibn Sina's canon of medicine, European doctors would have lacked their standard medical guide for over 600 years. Without Al-Khwarizmi's algebra, there would be no framework for mathematics as we know it. Without the astronomical chart of Al-Biruni and Al-Tusi, explorers like Columbus may never have set sail with the confidence to cross unknown seas. The influence was not limited to science. The Islamic world gave Europe tools of thought that transformed its future. Philosophers like Averroes and Al-Farabi reintroduced Aristotle to the West, challenging scholars to question, reason, and debate. These ideas later fueled the Renaissance, sparking an age of inquiry that forever changed the world. The Renaissance painters, architects, and thinkers who reshaped Europe owed more than they knew to the libraries and classrooms of Muslim lands. Architecture also carried this legacy across time. The pointed arch, the dome, and the minaret did more than define skylines. They inspired new designs across continents. The graceful patterns of Islamic art, rooted in calligraphy and geometry, left their imprint not only in mosques but in palaces and public spaces that still stand today. In Spain, the Alhambra whispers the story of a lost kingdom. In India, the Taj Mahal reflects the marriage of Persian, Turkish, and Indian styles, blending faith and artistry into one of the most recognizable buildings on Earth. But perhaps the greatest legacy of the civilization is not found in stone or manuscripts, but in its spirit of curiosity. The Islamic world believed that knowledge was not the property of one people or one place. It was a gift to be shared. Scholars welcomed ideas from Greece, Persia, India, and China, weaving them into something new and stronger. This openness created a culture where innovation thrived. That legacy remains a lesson for the modern world. Progress comes not from isolation but from exchange, from dialogue, and from the courage to learn from others. Even the principles of law and governance left their mark. The concept that leaders should rule with justice, that wealth should be shared through charity, and that education was a right rather than a privilege influenced societies far beyond the borders of the Islamic empires. These values did not disappear with political decline. They continued to inspire reformers and leaders in later generations, reminding the world that power is measured not only by conquest, but by compassion and responsibility. And while empires collapsed, the global connections built through the Islamic world endured. Trade routes that once carried silks, spices, and books laid the groundwork for a global economy. Pilgrimages and cultural exchanges linked Africa, Asia, and Europe in ways that outlasted any dynasty. Even today, the echoes of those connections remain visible in languages, in place names, in scientific terminology, and in cultural traditions shared across continents. The most powerful proof of this legacy is that we live with it every day. Every time a doctor consults medical texts, every time a student solves an equation, every time an astronomer names a star, they are drawing on the work of a civilization that lived centuries ago. The rulers may have vanished, but the knowledge, the ideas, and the spirit of the Islamic world are still alive. This is what makes the Islamic civilization remarkable. Its legacy was not tied to territory or armies, but to wisdom that crossed boundaries and survived the test of time. It reminds us that what we build in stone may crumble, but what we build in thought can inspire generations forever. And in that sense, the Islamic civilization did not simply belong to the past. It still belongs to us all. Empires rise and empires fall, but the true strength of a civilization is not written in the battles it won or the lands it conquered. It is written in the ideas it leaves behind. For 1,000 years, the Islamic civilization carried the torch of knowledge, faith, and unity, lighting the way for generations across the globe. Its discoveries shaped medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. Its faith bound together nations and cultures. Its spirit of curiosity opened doors that the world still walks through today. And now, the question is not only about history, it is about us. What will we do with this legacy? Will we honor it by seeking knowledge with the same passion? By embracing unity over division? By building bridges instead of walls? The story of the Islamic world reminds us that civilizations are remembered not only for their rulers, but for the wisdom they shared with humanity. That wisdom is not buried in the past. It is alive in every book, every classroom, every discovery that continues to shape our future. So, let us not simply remember history. Let us learn from it. Let us carry its torch forward.